that worked that got me here.
I just sent the link to everyone. I copied it from the meeting that we're in here.
Huh.
But it's strange because I simply forwarded the email. So I don't know why it would have different. I don't know what I would have done wrong because I was under the impression I always use the same email and forward it. But yeah.
People are starting to come in. I think they're checking their email because they had a problem.
Yes.
So yeah.
And
yeah, that's the one that I clicked in that worked with me not having to wait for you.
is that me who's making that noise?
Oh.
I hear it also.
So okay. Yeah. So there's a few people there's 8 on YouTube. But I see 9 on YouTube. So there's getting more people there. And I sent the email around to everyone. I don't know why Lauren isn't coming. I told him to look at his email. Maybe it depends. So I sent 2 emails now. Yeah. Okay. So that at least Lauren can come in. So that's a bit, I don't know why it's always, I have to think that maybe for next week I will make 2 different links for the meetings, and I don't know why that happened. Okay, anyway, I will start with the announcements, which then the people can look up on YouTube if they come in here late. And okay, I have to do this anyway different. I have to move the screen over here. And now you guys are here. And until then, people might have seen either on YouTube. I mean, many people realize if there's a problem, they can look at this, or that email that I sent might have come true. So I would like to welcome everyone to the 5th season of FINE. It started with the Corona pandemic, which is kind of not finished, but changing. We have more than 600 registered emails for the FINE, and I got about 50 emails back today that people are in the field or whatsoever, which of course is good for us, for our entire field, that people can go back again and collect data in the field. But we also realized that for many of us, it's not easy, even without Corona or when things get more normal again, to meet colleagues and work on social evolution on a weekly basis, because not everybody works at a big university where there are several research groups like this. And so we think FINE is still a nice opportunity for us to meet on a weekly basis with worldwide experts and to discuss and to hear fascinating talks. And you see here the program we made for this fall semester. And I think, in fact, we were able again to get a lot of very interesting people to present. And I don't want to go through all the talks now because it would take too much time and I cannot prioritize one after the other. But if you want to get this detailed information, you can also find it either on the homepage from FINE, socialevolutionseminar.com, and then you can go to the current speakers and the current seminar where you find this information. You find it on our YouTube homepage of the FINE seminar where we have the program also. And you can also follow us on Twitter. It's at FINE _seminar, where we always give information about the talk that is coming to happen this week or the coming weeks. The only thing I would like to mention here already is, because I know not everybody has 2 hours to stay here until the end, to already tell you what we're going to talk about next week, because next week will be something special, something new in FINE. We will not have one person, one very established scientist presenting, but we will have 3 young colleagues from Southern Africa that work on different topics of social evolution, presenting themselves in relatively short talks of about 15 minutes each, followed by 5 minutes discussion, and then a long discussion. And I hope that many of you will come and join us next week when Standive, Sept, and Silive are presenting the diverse topics they're working on. Standive is working on symbionts, Sept on naked mole rats, and Salive is working on birds and glucocorticoids and adaptation to stress and harshness. So 3 diverse topics that should be of interest for nearly all of us. But today we are starting with a fascinating talk by Erika van de Waal that brings us back to Corona, because she was supposed to present in the spring term, but she couldn't because, like many of us, she had caught Corona, even though she was vaccinated. And in her case, it was so severe that she couldn't talk properly, and so we had to cancel her talk. And we're very happy that she is now here today to start this FINE of the fall 2022 with a very interesting talk about what she has been doing for more than 10 years now in South Africa. Erika studied in Switzerland at the University of Neuchâtel, where she did both her master's and her PhD. Which the PhD she finished in 2010. Before she then went as a postdoc to St. Andrews in Scotland. Everybody knows it's a very famous institution if you want to work on animal cognition. And coming back to Switzerland in 2015 with a Franco Weiss Fellowship, which is a great fellowship that is based at the ETH in Zurich. So they are managing this fellowship, but everyone can get it from all over the world with all interesting topics of research that are important for society, and do his or her research wherever he wants, also based where he wants. But she came back to Zurich, or to Switzerland, and then to Zurich to work together with Karl van Scheik at the University of Zurich. And she was at this stage then in 2011 already starting to work on the Inkawa Vervet project, a project where different research groups from Switzerland decided they want to study primates in the field, also with relation to cognition, and not like what is often done only one primate group, but want to pool resources, both financially and manpower, to have proper sample sizes. And in fact, they are monitoring there at the moment, I think it was 7 to 8 groups and 200 monkeys, so that they can really do replicates of their field studies and the experiments in the field. So in 2015, Erika became the director of this Vervet project in Southern Africa, and she was also guiding this project very well through the Corona pandemic. I talked a lot to her about this because all these field projects had these problems. They managed relatively well. And in 2017, she stayed in Switzerland, but then moved to the University of Lausanne, where she got an SNF, Swiss National Science Foundation, and professorship, junior professorship, which is a contract position for 6 years. So it would be ending soon, but in the meantime, she got one of these prestigious ERC and grants from the European Research Council for young researchers for another 5 years, so very well funded. And so she will stay in Switzerland and can continue the project and her research there. Erica has published more than 50 papers in all important journals of primatology, behavioral ecology, animal cognition, or in all the journals of the Royal Society, including one paper in Science. So she's very productive scientist that then publishes in a broad area, not only within us, but also with people, mob psychologists working in the area of cognition. So her research has a broad audience. And this is, of course, also due to her commitment to the project in South Africa. And I talked to her before the Fine Science. She said for her, the more important than to have a good position is to have good research money to continue this project there, which is shows how ambitious she is and how dedicated to the project. And yeah, now I'm looking very much forward to welcome Erica to give us her presentation about lab cognition going wild and the studies on the vervet monkeys.
Thanks a lot, Karsten, for the lovely introduction. Let's try to see if I can share everything going well. Try to put a laser. Oh, maybe I have to put full screen first. It's on annotate. Closing this first. And now it doesn't want me to put full screen. Oh yes, here it is. Can you all see the screen well?
Yes, I can see it well.
Okay, and now I have the little red thing to show you around. So hopefully it will work fine. So it's a great pleasure to be presenting some of my research to all of you today. And thanks again to the organizer of the Fine Seminar to giving me a second slot as I had to cancel the previous one. And so I'm Erica van der Waal, and I will present to you some of my field experiments on vervet monkeys today. It doesn't want to switch to the next page. What is happening there?
Sometimes one doesn't share the screen, but I think I have photo. Maybe
I have to screen. I have to share everything, I think. Let's see. No, not better. So we tried before, and of course it worked, and now it doesn't work. Let's try. Share my screen up. Sorry, you see now, and now can I put the red thing to show you things around? Yes, but can I move slides? It doesn't want to move the slides. Let's stop with the spotlight. I had this once. Sorry, we're already late, and now we are getting even later. So let's try to do it without. Share screen. Let's see. Hopefully that's the last attempt. I think I'm going to show you with the normal mouse, and hopefully, yeah. So now at least it works. And as soon as I put the laser pointer, it's blocking. So sorry about this, but hopefully, can you see my normal mouse when I move it around or not?
Yes, I can see it properly.
Then I'll try to show it with this. Sorry for this. So yeah, I'm interested in cognition, and the specificity of my field site is trying really to adapt field experiments to the wild. And my major topic of interest is culture. And so we know it's something really that we have in a unique way for its complexity and diversity. But the basis of this culture is what we call social learning. And actually, this social learning is really spread across animals. So we found it in many different insect species, in fish and birds, and of course in many mammals as well. And what is interesting is even in solitary species like this tortoise here, if you do a social learning experiment, they will learn socially. So it really seems to be very relevant information to get whatever others are doing around. And so if we think of biological evolution, we have a parent generation, and then the offspring generation inherit from this parent generation. But if we think of cultural evolution, here the arrows could theoretically go in all directions. And so recently in a review paper with Andy Whiten, we highlighted 3 main pathways that seem to be really important in primates across their different developmental stages. So a first stage would be really learning predominantly from the mother. And so this is taking place in early infancy, and it's really learning from the primary caregiver, which in most primate species is the mother. And then what are these infants learning? And that would be really a complete behavioral repertoire. And then there would be a second phase that is learning from improved models. So that would be older juveniles that will pay attention to other within group members and potentially gain some selective knowledge and skills that their primary caretaker might be lacking. And then in a third phase, this will be more learning from group mates after dispersal. So this will be this horizontal learning once adult, and it will specifically be dispersing individuals when they go to a new group, they would learn from new group members, and this would be learning foreign knowledge and skills that they didn't acquire in the natal group before. And so throughout my career on social learning, I first really had the focus on mechanism, trying to understand what can primates learn from each other. So, and they're going from what we call cognitively low-level mechanisms, such as local or stimulus enhancement, to cognitively high-level one, can they imitate or emulate? But then actually, throughout by my research, I realized that I'm actually a lot more interested in the biases than on these mechanisms, especially doing experiments in the wild. It's very hard to really tackle the mechanism part, but then it's easier to learn about biases. And so here it's one schematic representation of some of the biases that have been described. And so first of all, there is a distinction if you copy about the content. So copying whatever solution gives a higher payoff. Or if the individuals are more looking at the context. So in the context, you could have frequency dependent biases, such as copying what the majority of others are doing, what is called conformity. Or it could also be individual based biases, such as infant copying their mother, or group members copying older group members, or higher ranking. And so I try to investigate these questions in my research. And so this kind of research has been mainly done in captivity, which enables researchers, of course, to have very controlled experiments. But then I think that there are various limitations with this approach. So the groups and the individuals are lacking natural social structure and challenges. They also have plenty free time to conduct this testing. And especially for primates, some individuals are really enculturated. So growing up with human artifacts really change their physical cognition. And I think for all these reasons, it's really important to complement what is done in captivity with field experiments. And so I'm studying the vervets at the Inkavu Vervet project that Karsten mentioned. So Inkavu means monkey in Zulu, because I'm studying them in South Africa in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. And so we started this field site now 12 years ago. And as Karsten nicely said, so this is an average home range of one of our study group. But what is specific is that we have this 6 highly overlapping groups that are habituated and on which we can work. We have even now 7 ones that that was a previous split group of the group you have here in red that we have also started to follow again. And so this showed you that for the environment, it's very similar. So there is a lot of overlap between the home range. And then also genetically, it's one single population. So for my topic of social learning, it's really a great population to look at, because if you found difference in behavior between the groups, you can quite easily exclude ecology or genetic to be responsible for the behavioral variation that we observe. So we have and another very nice thing is that in the nearest city, Vrijheid, I have access to the Watch Vervet Rehabilitation Center, which gets orphan vervets and recreate groups for release. And so I have access to captive vervets so that I can compare the cognitive abilities of the wild and the captive ones. And so in the field, we have now over 200 monkeys that are followed multiple times a week, and we have like long-term now life history of these individuals, and they're habituated enough to participate to many different field experiments. And so why am I studying vervets? So they don't all read French psychology textbook upside down. That was at one of the sanctuary. But they are really known to be opportunistic, which means that they engage easily with human artifacts. They're also not endangered. They're even considered pests in South Africa, so which makes it a lot easier to have ethical approval to conduct experiments and some captures in the wild. They're also semi-terrestrial, which means that they're very easy to observe and also to come to experimental setup on the ground. And then I think they have a very nice group structure. So group size is about 30 individuals, so which allow us to study multiple groups. So with experiments, you always need control groups and your experimental groups, so you need a large sample size. And then females stay in the group where they were born, whereas male disperse when they reach sexual maturity. And what is nice is that they disperse multiple times throughout their lifetime. So males typically in our study population will stay about a year in a group. So which means that we have plenty fluidity in the group structure with many males coming and going that we can follow in our study population. So before going to the experiments, I wanted to highlight a few results about just sociality of vervet monkeys out of the long-term data, as I guess some of you might be really interested in these aspects as well. So this is just from the press in Switzerland after work on intersexual dominance, and saying these alpha female that dominate males. And so what did we do there? So if we look at vervets so this is just a phylogenetic tree of all primates and classified as male dominant or not male dominant. So here you have the vervets, and they are classified as male dominant species. And then I was approached by Charlotte Hemmelreich, who is very interested in intersexual dominance. And as I had this long-term field site with many groups, she said, oh, we should investigate this question. And so we looked at 7 years of data on 4 groups. And so for me, I had this idea, as in the textbook, that so there is quite a big male-female dimorphism. You have a female here on the left with a logger, a male on the right, and males weigh about 1.4 more than females. They're also a lot more muscular, and they have longer canines. So you expect 1-to-1 fight that the male would be winning. And going through, and usually as they have very different ways of getting their dominance, it made sense for me to calculate them separately. So female inherit the rank of their mother, whereas male disperse and then have to fight and get a rank, and the ranking in males change a lot over time. But so finally, I put all the data together of 7 years, 4 groups. And in the groups where I had enough conflicts, we could come with a female dominance index. And so what was really interesting is that in 3 groups, actually, on average, all females were above all males. So really clearly, not just co-dominance, but even female dominance in 3 of our groups. And then if we looked at the order between adult males and females, we had in most of our groups, actually, the alpha was a female and not a male. And sometimes, as you see, even 2 females before the first male. And so this was really interesting to look at this aspect of different sex ratio. But then also we had the example, like in the previous review paper, that we had looked only at these two groups that were unimale. There it was 0 female dominance, and it was really the male on top and the females after. So I think this really highlights the importance of studying many groups. And also for me, it was challenging the idea that there was I believed the fact that there was an alpha male in Vervet groups. And then when you finally look at the data and combine all the conflict, you find very interesting pattern. Then female Vervets are also really interesting and powerful in the between group encounters. So this is data from colleagues at my field site. And so they found that the females Vervets use either the carrot, meaning grooming, or the stick, aggression, to get males to participate, to fight. And so if you just look at the two bottom graph here, this is the proportion of aggressive episode that males participate in during the between group encounter. And the first one is about conflict. So if they were not aggressed by a female, they participate very little. If they were aggressed by a female, the same males participate a lot more. And this is the same with grooming. So it really seems to be both ways seem to be very effective to have males to help in the fight. And then on the same topic of between group encounter, I published this year a paper with colleagues where we looked a bit at the driver and the outcome of the conflicts on 4 of our groups that are circled in different color, as you can see here. And so we saw that most of the between group encounter occur close to the riverbed, where it's also the vegetation is richer in this area, and most of it occur also in the core area of each group. And so on this graph, you see that the occurrence of a between group conflict, that the encounter turns into a conflict, really increase in core area that are of a very rich value of density of plants and potential food, whereas outside core area, groups will mostly avoid each other and it won't turn into a conflict. And then interestingly, we also found that actually smaller groups were more likely to win than larger group. And this was looked at with the number of adult females, but it was highly correlated to the numbers of adult males and the total number of the group. And so we have one group that is over 70 monkeys, and I think there is like a coordination problem. Those groups are very spread, and potentially part of the group doesn't even know that the other part is having an encounter. So maybe that might be the reason. And then, not surprisingly, we found that focal group are winning more when they are close to the core area. And so another aspect where females seem to really know what they're doing is more on social cognition. So here we did the playback to try to understand what females had, what knowledge females had about the other females in their group and the hierarchy. And so we play back these kind of calls. I hope you will hear them. Could you hear that? So it was an aggressive grunt followed by the victim scream. And so we either play the control, so a high-ranking female aggressing a lower-ranking one, or we play in experiments where we reverse it. So we use a grunt of a low-ranking female as if she was aggressing a high-ranking, and we took a scream from another context and put them together. And so what we found here is that a third-party female that we would play this playback to, she would not watch long towards the speaker in the control, whereas she would look a lot longer in the experimental setup. So as if really she's puzzled by the fact that this low ranking is aggressing the high ranking. And then we did the same about female knowledge about male hierarchy. And here again, even if males, as I said, come and go, and it's a lot more fluid, they seem to know what's going on. Whereas when we tested it on males, here we found no significant difference in the time spent looking towards the speaker. So here we cannot say if they don't know about the female hierarchy or if they don't care about it, but at least they didn't react it at all to the experimental call played to them here. And so now I will move to after this background on the vervets, move more to the experiments that I've done, and they will be focusing more on what and from whom are vervets learning socially. And so I will guide you through 5 different field experiments, and then I'll finish with some work in progress and perspectives. And so this is the first experiment I've conducted during my PhD. So it's what we call an artificial fruit, so a kind of puzzle box that can be opened in 2 different ways to get a reward. And so I wanted to see, could they learn how to open this box? So I presented 1 box to the group, and so who was monopolizing it became my model. And so in 3 groups, it was the alpha male who became the model for the experiment. And the other 3 groups, it was actually a dominant female who became the model. And here I should already have thought of this, the fact that I had alpha females in some groups, but in this time I thought more, okay, these females might be more food motivated, or maybe the male is less habituated and a bit shy, that's why he doesn't monopolize it. That's why I ended up with 3 groups with dominant females as models, 3 groups with dominant males, showing different techniques to open the box. And interestingly, in groups with a female model, more monkeys were participating in the experiments when they were offered boxes. And then did they copy the side to open? So in black, they were opening the same side. And here we see again that they copied the same side when it was the female model, and did it totally randomly with male models. So here we wondered what has been driving this result. So we looked at what was happening around demonstration. So how many individuals were around? That's the first graph, no difference in the 2 contexts. How many aggression was done by the demonstrator? No different as well. And the only significant difference was the attention of the bystanders. So when it was a female opening the box, the bystanders were looking in the direction of the model and what it was doing, whereas when it was a male, they were doing it a lot less. So there seems to be this selective attention of the vervets towards females who, as it's a foraging task and they stay their whole life in their home range, maybe it makes sense to copy what females are doing when it's about food. And then interestingly, when we looked at were they successful in their first manipulation, actually male-female didn't make any difference this time, but the one that were successful were monkeys that were in the 2 groups with contact with human infrastructure. So one was a picnic site group and the other one was a fishing camp group. And so this made me really raise my interest for this, what impact has captivity and contact with humans into cognition. And so this research was done at a different field site during my PhD. And so the results I'll present after are all, the 6 group I presented from the Inca Vervet project are all wild primates, and none have contact with touristic area like these ones. And so actually with the first experiment I did, I couldn't answer my question, do they learn how to open the box? Because this first black and white box, the 2 different doors were on 2 different colored ends. So I could just look, do they copy the side to open? So then during my postdoc, I did a new artificial fruit. This time was on 1 door, you have 1 hook where you could either slide or lift. And so this time we could really see that they copy how to open. And then we also did another experiment in captivity where we looked at bodily matching of opening techniques of little tubes. And here we found also that the technique demonstrated then spread to the group. Following my first experiment, I wanted to understand how rigid is this rule of copying the female of the group. And so I like the way the press talked about this experiment. Female monkeys don't trust males even when they're obviously right. So what did we do here? So we had a similar type of box, but this time we could choose with a remote control which side could be open. So for here, this dominant male has access to the black side, and the white side is blocked for him. And there he gets access to 5 pieces of apples. So here we introduce a payoff biases. So dominant male monkeys would get a larger food reward than dominant female. We wanted to see if with this monkeys would then significantly copy more the male than the female side of the box. You'll see the female just now. And she gets only 1 piece of apple. So first, of course, we had to do again control group with 1 piece of apple on each side, because it was a different study population and different methods with having 2 models in the same group. And we found again that that's the number of participants copying either the female or the male side, that they copy more the female side if it's 1-to-1. Then when males get 5 times more food, then this effect disappeared. So then we wonder who didn't copy the female and copy the male side. So we looked at kinship, age, sex, rank, and the only factor that was significant was the sex of the participant. So in the control group, really no difference. Both males and female copied more the female side. But then in our experimental group here, it was really interesting that females stayed highly conservative and carry on copying the female side, despite the fact that in this payoff setup, it wasn't maybe the good choice to do, whereas males showed a lot more behavioral flexibility and were here copying the male a lot more than what they did before. And so I think this is really interesting if you think again of the ecology of the species. So male dispersed, they have to learn multiple times new home range, new social structures. So maybe it makes sense for them to be really flexible in their behavior, whereas females, they stay their whole life in the same group. So maybe for them, just behaving like the other female of the group is what is more important for their bonding and for their own survival. So I think potentially 2 different strategies here. And now I will present some more recent experiments that I've done with my postdoc, Charlotte Canteloup. And so these are open diffusion experiments. So the big difference from the previous experiments that we don't train any model. So here we offer this puzzle box that had 2 ways to be open. And so here you'll see this is an adult female on the left using the drawer technique. And then you have adult male on the right. And we will use the lift technique on the top. And so with this way of offering multiple boxes, so we offered 8 boxes at the same time in a group, we could see who would innovate and how it would spread in the group. And so we did observational networks. So we looked at all the monkeys around the experimental setup, who was looking at whom, doing what, before they started opening the box. So here in the NORA group, it was Geneva, the alpha female, who was the first one to innovate using the drawer, the lift technique, if I remember well, in red. And so you see also the large circle is for the order, and then the coloring is for the ranking. And in the Kubu group here, it's the dominant, the alpha male who started with the other technique. And then you see how it spread through the group and who learned it or not. So not everyone in the group ended up learning. So I think we had 18 in NORA and 10 in the other group. So some group members observe and didn't get to open, but the majority of group members learned to open. And then we used the network-based diffusion analysis. This was done with the help of Will Hoppit. And we've done that looking at the rate of social transmission between individuals and looking if it's proportional to the network connection between them. And what we found with this approach is that the way to open the box was indeed socially learned. And then we could investigate the pathway of social transmission. And we found no sex, age, or kin bias in this experiment. but we found a significant rank bias, that they were copying more higher rank group members. So this copying higher rank could still be two different who strategy, as we call them. It could be copying most successful group members. So as I said, it was dominance that innovated in both groups. There was also dominance were manipulating more the boxes, and we're making also more successful manipulation leading to the reward than subordinates. But then it could also be a prestige bias. Here we found no difference in observation rates. So individuals were looking at both dominant and subordinate. But interestingly, when they were looking at dominant, they were more likely to use the same technique than when they looked at the subordinate. So there seems to be an observation effect of who you're looking at. So still these two options are there. And with this, these results, we cannot disentangle between, is it a prestige or a successful bias. Then in another experiment, I offered sandy grapes to the monkeys. Here I wanted to see, would they start cleaning the grapes and how, and I was hoping to get like group level tradition of how to eat these grapes. And I didn't get anything at the group level, but I got some interesting matrilineal similarities. So here you have the 6 groups, and each color is a different matriline, and the way the bars are filled are the different cleaning techniques that we observed. And this is the percentage of grape that they did with one kind of cleaning or the other. And what is in white is what they ate without cleaning. And so we found that the only level of matching in our in this experiment was matriline, so mother and offspring. And interestingly, this was 15 experiments, and so that's an average over the 15. But if we looked over time, how it evolved, so this is just 3 matrilines of the fishing camp group. In black is the mother, in red is the offsprings, and we really found that there was matching, dynamic matching over time. And I think the number 3 here, it's like a perfect example of how the data we would have predicted that they do. This was for rubbing in hands, and they really all started up in the middle of the experiments and did it at the same time. With this experiment, we could also look at what naive infants were doing the first time they were approaching the experiment. So on this graph, you have, this is the 10 first grapes eaten. The first individual is the mother, the second one, the infant. And you see that there is quite a bit of matching. And interestingly, for the one that ate at the same time, then not only their mother, but other group members, all of them were eating more similarly to their mother than to other group members. So really this focusing of infant to how their mother is dealing with the food. Then we've done with my postdoc Charlotte Canteloup and my PhD student Pooja Dongre, another open diffusion experiment, but this time instead of looking at how they open a puzzle box, we offered them novel food. And so this was a peanut in shells, and so they had to open them before they could eat them, of course. And so Charlotte did a paper really focusing on the way monkeys were opening these peanuts, and this was on 2 groups, and it was really again with the same observational network of who is doing what, and really detailed video coding of all the techniques. And so we found 3 different ways of opening the peanuts, either cracking them with their hands, with their mouth from the top or from the middle. And then in the one group, it was a immigrant, low-ranking male who's done it on the first trial. And then 25 out of the 34 monkeys learned to do it. And then in Kubu, it was an infant male who started it with the technique of cracked mouth from side. And this was only at the 3rd exposure. And then only 9 other juveniles started eating peanuts. So really also the spreading was very different. And we use experience-weighted attraction models to code this social learning diffusion. And this was with help of Brendan Barrett. And we could, with this, analyze the entire behavioral sequence, not only the first opening, as we did with the NDBA before, but this time was really the whole sequence, and do they keep doing one way or another? And so what did we find here? So this just illustrates for the group NORA, across 11 exposures, the 3 different techniques. And so you see that the 3 of them are quite used at the start, and then it seems to converge with the majority of peanuts open with the crack mouse side. So really that it progressed through the group, and then one technique is favored over the others. And so we applied this modeling approach to different social learning biases that we could have had expected. And actually what had the better fit was our global model. And here you have to understand what we mean by payoff bias. So to have a payoff bias, we looked at the mean observed probability of a technique being successful in the previous 20 minutes before someone opened the peanut. So it's really reflecting what was currently the efficient method used by group members. So it's not a fixed technique over time. And so here we found in this global model, there was both individual and social learning in it. And then the 2 bias that seem to be mostly responsible for the social learning involved in this spreading of opening technique was payoff bias first, and then also rank bias, doing more like what dominant individuals are doing in the group. And then we wanted to carry on with this experiment because we had a male that dispersed from NORA that knew about the peanuts, and he entered by donkey group here in blue, in light blue. And so we wanted to see, could a male bring this peanut knowledge to a new group? So this is the proportion of group a member learning to extract and eat peanut after the first event during the first experiment. And so here you have the number of adults and the number of juveniles. So this is the group I told you about, just the infant innovating. That's a group with the immigrant male that we did the detailed analysis. And then we had 3 other groups where we had in 2 groups, the 2 last one, it was an immigrant that came in with the knowledge. And then in lemon tree, it was an immigrant who innovated, like what we had in the orange group here. And then we looked, this was the first trial, then we looked across 5 trials, how many group members would start to eat peanuts. And so we had 3 groups with immigrant males present that innovated, and it really took off to many group members. And then interestingly, in the orange group, it was an immigrant who innovated during the first trial, but then he dispersed and left the group. And then you see it was only juvenile who had learned from him on the first session, and this orange curve is very slow. And then the last curve is this dark blue with the infant innovator, and it's only 2 others, juveniles, who start to eat. So it really seems that immigrants could trigger novel food acquisition. And then I think what is interesting is if you think of a primate population, then you sometimes find group level traditions, and then potentially the immigrants could really be bringing knowledge to different groups. And then we think that muzzle contact is really important in this context. So this is during one of these peanut experiments. You have an immigrant male here on the left who is eating peanut. The group doesn't know about peanut. You see this adult female doing a lot of muzzle contact to him and really trying to smell the food that he's eating before she dares to start eating the food. So we observed this muzzle contact in this experiment context a lot. In natural observation, the frequency is a lot less. And interestingly, it was very high in the first experiments. And then when monkeys started to learn about the food, then it really decreased the proportion of muzzle contact. And so here we found that the target of muzzle contact are mainly knowledgeable. So knowledgeable, we mean that are eating peanuts. It's not that the other know they are knowledgeable, it's just that they know how to eat the peanut. And so adults that know how to eat the peanut are really the ones that are targeted by other group members. And then if we compare between females here in orange and males here, we find actually a significant difference. And once knowledgeable, males are even more targeted than females. So potentially the group is really seeking for these immigrant potential new knowledge. And then the last experiment I will present, it's a food coloring experiment. And so this time we didn't want to train one group member to do something, but whole groups to have a habit. And so here we trained over 100 monkeys to eat either pink or blue corn, and wanted to see if naive infants could learn an arbitrary foraging preference. And so this, I think, is a nice example. This picture is little Porto here sitting on the blue, eating pink, like the rest of his matriline. And so we had 27 infants that year. 26 of them started to eat the local preference. And I think the one exception is really interesting, is it was the offspring of the lowest ranking female in our largest group. So she waited for multiple hours and then grabbed the previously wrong color that had now the exact same taste and started eating the other color, and the infants selectively copied what the mother was eating and not what the other 50 monkeys were doing. So there's really this infant do as mother do, I think it's also here. But more exciting was that when we did this experiment was during the mating season, and that's when male dispersed between the groups. So we had males like this one, Elton, that had learned to eat one color. So they had their individual knowledge, and then they moved to a group where the group is having the opposite knowledge. And so will they rely on their own individual learning, or will they learn socially from their new group? So it was the first time we could really test this in the wild. And I was very lucky to have 10 males that nicely went from pink to blue. As you see, it wasn't designed for this, it was designed for the infants. So if they had gone north, south, east, west, they would have gone to same color, and I would have had no data points. So you sometimes have to be lucky in research. And so what happened with these males? So here you have their origin group, the color, and this is in their new group, what they were eating, the color they were choosing. So the first item of corn they selected, there was a tendency to switch, but we still had 5 exceptions. But then when we looked at really the color they were choosing when they were not outranked, and over the long time of the experiment, then all but one switched to the new group. So it was the first time we could really see this a conformity to group members in the wild. Since then, there were very nice experiments also in tits showing this, and also in tool use in chimpanzees. And so what I presented today was like a puzzle of different social learning biases, going a bit in all direction with the vervet monkeys. So 2 on content, 1 on conformity, 2 highlighting kinship, 1 on the sex, and 2 on rank. And so it's really hard to understand what are really the adaptive function of the different rules, who to copy when. But I think if we put it back in the framework that I initially presented about the different developmental stage, then we can order things a bit nicely. So if you remember these 3 main phases, then if we think of learning from the mother, we have 2 experiments where we really find this. And then when individuals grow older, then they seem to really learn from improved model. And here pay a lot of attention to higher rank group members. Then we find the 3rd phase that males seems to conform to their new group food preference. But interestingly, what we didn't really develop in our review paper is this other phase, potential phase of learning from immigrants, which I think is highly interesting and that we should focus more on. So what I presented was really experimental. I'm also trying to look at behavioral variation between our groups and natural behavior. And here I highlighted in this paper difference in diets that could not be explained only by ecology between the groups, also in conflict resolution, even lip smacking frequency that was varying a lot between groups, and the social structure and dynamics of the groups when we use social network analysis varies a lot. So I think we really need to pay attention to this and not only focus on different primate population, but on many groups within the same population. And then finally, I'm going to highlight some of the work we are currently doing in my team. So this is work done by Tecla Mor, a PhD student in my group. And here we've been bringing a touchscreen to the field and trying to see if they can figure out how to have it work. And then, of course, if it works out, we can then do plenty different types of experiments. So here they just had to touch the blue square. And so here's some first results on this just first step experiment of training them to touch the blue square. We found that there are more participants in the sanctuary than in the wild. This is the sample size, but we had a lot more wild monkeys than sanctuary one. Then if we look at age, sex, class, here we found a significant difference for females, that adult females participated more than juvenile females, and the opposite for males, that it was juvenile females that were participating more. But then more interestingly is this last graph here, where we look at the number of attempts needed to pass the task. So is there a difference in cognitive abilities between our wild and sanctuary population? And this is included many different groups in both setup, and we find actually no significant difference. So they really seem to have similar attempts to finally reach the task, even if a lot less of wild monkeys are keen to participate. If they do participate, they solve the task as fast. Then in my group, we're also doing a comparative approach, trying to work on humans, both with, this is with my postdoc Rachel Harrison, both with food choice experiments and puzzle box, so really using the same experiments as we do on vervets and adapting them to humans. Unfortunately, I have no results yet on this. The pandemic slowed down this research a lot more than my monkey research. And then recently I was awarded a ERC grant named Knowledge Moves. And there I really want to investigate male movement between groups. We have been fitting 36 loggers on monkeys and are taking plenty different measurement on them. And we also want to see if they can transfer knowledge with touchscreen experiments. And so in this grant, we are also using environmental DNA. So the aim there is to try to look at the diet in detail. So here you have all the different plant species that we could find that they're eating. And so this is from the molecular analysis. This is from observation in the field. And you see quite some matching, but we have a lot more detailed information from the fecal samples. And then for insects, this is just amazing because it's very hard to see what vervets are eating in the field. And so we have some broad categories of observation. And then we have all these families that we can get at with eDNA. And the aim with this molecular tool now is try to go more to group and individual level, not just saying what they're eating in general, but variation between individuals. And this is 4 different groups, their diet of what plant species they eat. But if we look only at adult female, then we see a lot more differences between the groups. So really as if females might have some preference that they pass on to each other. Then I also got a Bronchovice Fellowship Collaborative grant. And so there I'm trying to look at the interaction that monkeys could have with a 4-legged robot. First, if they can tolerate the 4-legged robot, and then if they can potentially learn from it. I have a 1-minute video. Karsten, should I end here or should I show the 1-minute video?
No, please show it.
We started a bit late, so with all the technical issues.
Yeah.
So I've done some more on with the robot this last field session, so I'll be happy to explain what we've tried to do. And then finally, for the perspective, so we are just starting an urban vervet project with my collaborator, Sophia Force. And this is in collaboration with Professor Colin Down from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And so this South African professor has been already following 6 groups, but just for spatial distribution. And we're going to try to look at behavior and cognition and try to see the difference in these urban vervets compared to the wild ones and the captive ones. So you can see more on our field site if you're interested. And then just to finish, so when we started 12 years ago, the Inca Vervet project, it was in a 10,000 hectare hunting farm. And the owner was fed up with the hunters and wanted to move to ecotourism. So we were the first step in this direction, renting a part of his land for research. And now 12 years later, the sibling that inherited the land are trying now to start a triple size, so over 30,000 hectare community-based Loziba wilderness, really for conservation and ecotourism. So it's really nice to see how coming as researcher can give the hope that other things can be done on land, and hopefully helping for to preserve more species and a bit to have a nicer environment also for the community around to find more work. With this, of course, I have to thank many people, so I don't put the list because you can imagine of 12 years with a team of more than 10 people or all year long. This work could never have been done alone. So I thank really all the field team, the collaborators, all the monkeys that participated, of course, the funders, and you for your attention. We cannot hear you, Carsten.
No, yes, okay. Now you can hear me. Thank you very much, Erika, for a great talk. And first of all, I would like to apologize for everyone for the problem with the links. But because of this, before we come to Erika's discussion, I quickly want to tell everyone, why are you not here? Tell everyone about what's coming next week, so that you, even though I made a mistake today, you come back to the Young African Researchers at the Frontiers of Social Evolution seminar, where we have 3 young colleagues from Africa and presenting on different topics on symbiosis, on naked mole rats, and on birds and heat stress. That will be very interesting. I hope everybody is still going to come. Now, that was a great talk on social learning. And because we talk about social learning, I quickly want to apologize again and say what was the problem. The problem was I have a Zoom link for the FIND seminar, and being lazy, I just used an old email to modify and copy for this invitation. But we also have individual meetings with the speaker, and I copied the link from the web page, and this link in the meantime had changed, and I don't know why and how. And this is why the FIND seminar, Carsten Strasbourg, had now an old link, which I sent to you, and a new link that I sent to Erika and a few people. And I just mentioned this here because it's about social learning, and maybe somebody else would have a similar problem in the future. And this is also why I now do something which I normally don't do. I have the first question. Erika, is there ever, do you know of any examples in the animal kingdom where animals learn from others doing not something right, but doing something wrong?
Yeah, so I think one good example there is actually the tool used in chimpanzee, the females dispersing. So so this is work done by Lydia Loons in Ivory Coast in the Thai chimp project. And there she found that female that dispersed tend to match the tool use choice. And she has been mapping the number of stones present and hardwood. So it's not about just the availability of tools to crack open the nuts, but that some females that were used to always crack with, or most of the time crack with stones, when they enter a community that do it with wood, that is usually less efficient and require more time to open the nut, they will switch to what is done in the group. So potentially really this social learning in adults, what I'm questioning, and I will soon have a perspective paper on this, is that in adults, the social learning is not about information for me. from what I see in the vervets in adults, it's more about fitting in the group and being like others. And I think we need more data on this to really understand, because up to now we always thought that if animals learn socially is to find the better information. But if they're adults and they have the information already, they still seem to change. So hopefully we can really understand. And we also know with the literature on homophily and mimicry that you bond more with others that behave more similarly in many different species. So potentially all like this social learning as adult is really has a social reason and not an informational one. And I'm interested in.
Okay, yeah, that's quite interesting, but maybe also a little bit worrying when one looks at human societies, what some people are learning that it doesn't make sense. Just to remind everyone, if you want to ask a question, put your question mark in the chat. I will then call you up. And before you ask your question, please quickly introduce yourself. What's your name? Where you're coming from? And I see that Eduardo has the first question from the audience.
Thank you, Erica, for a very, very interesting talk. Studies of cognition are quite outside my area of expertise, but I really find them fascinating. They made me think about all the research on social psychology that I learned back then. And definitely, I mean, we all get lucky sometimes. Fantastic how you got those males to actually disperse to the groups you needed them to disperse. The question I have is conformity, and now linking to what Carsten was saying that relates to our societies these days. I mean, it's such a complicated issue. People will do what others do. Now, are there ways in the field where you could manipulate that following what others are doing actually has costs? I mean, has negative, because giving them food, well, yes, but it's a positive reward. But how far? I mean, we all wish we could know how far people will go making the wrong decision just to conform. Are there ways in which you can explore that with the monkeys?
So I think in my food coloring experiment, it was already a little bit this. So I didn't expect this at all. I was really puzzled in the field when I observed, because so you had these two large containers of corn and everyone was fighting for the one color. And I thought that these immigrants who knew that the other color was good would just go and forage on the color that no one wanted. It was totally edible and totally fine. And so for me, this was already a little bit going in this direction, that then they waited their turn to eat and then have the same preference as the others. And then I did this experiment for multiple years. And even if more and more group members did try the other color, as soon as they had the choice and were not outranked, they would go back to this is the good food. And so for me, this is really like if you think of information and what is more adaptive, this shouldn't be taking place. Once they try and they see the other food is good, if they can get it before, they should stick to that. And that what I really wanted to do is try to do the same experiments, but at so neighboring groups have overlapping sleeping sites. So I was hoping to get male that dispersed to a neighboring group and could do the experiment at the exact same location. Because of course, when I did it, it was a different location in the new group. So potentially they have to update their information that the food in this place is still different, even if it's an experiment of what they knew before. But if it's at the same location, I was hoping then to be able to really disentangle, is it informational or social, the fact that they conform when they change group, because they would have changed group, but it would be at the same place that they would be eating. But I didn't get lucky with male dispersal at all when we tried to redo it. So you cannot be as lucky multiple times in a row. But I think with the touchscreen potentially here, I'm hoping that I can more manipulate the reward with either that with a symbol that are rewarded in some groups and not in others, and then male disperse. And can they bring knowledge about the symbol that was not rewarded before to the group? And then we could change also payoff, because it's little a piece of corn between 1 and 3 that falls. So we could have males bringing an option that is either more or less successful, and see who is copied. So hopefully with these kind of experiments, we can manipulate a bit more. Than without food, I always would love to find the way to do experiments without food. So there are the playbacks, the fake predators experiments we can do, but otherwise to get them to participate and engage, usually we need a reward. So maybe with new robots that look like monkey, we could do like experiments on behavior and integration at some point in many years, but at the moment I don't really see. And we tried also to move males around to really control this, but then they don't get accepted into groups. So we cannot also really change social structure or things, because we have no control of who is entering which group. Even if we release them in the middle of a group, it's not going to say they're going to stay there.
Thank you very much.
Then a question by Adriana.
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Erica, for such a nice talk. My question, well, I have two questions indeed. One, I'm not quite sure, at the very end you were mentioning that you've explored how it's social learning from a new individual in the group, right? So a new member in the group. And then what we should be looking in the future is how do they learn from immigrants? What would be the difference between an immigrant and a new member in the group? Wouldn't be like, in any case, new individuals that they haven't been in contact with?
Yeah, so I don't know if I wasn't clear and I did this dichotomy, but new group members. So it was, so the two things were that the first one was the new group member, so the immigrant learning from the resident. And then what I think we should look at is immigrants that can bring knowledge. So resident learning from immigrants. So the other, how much is this also important? Because in our paper, we highlighted more that maybe immigrant will learn from resident. But then actually with the peanut results, we found, actually maybe resident also learn from immigrants. So it goes, the arrows can go in both direction.
Okay, so I got it wrong in the first place. Okay, great. And then my next question, and this is something I might have missed at some point, but overall, there is a preference to learn from females, right? So I prefer learning from a female rather than a male. And then social rank also plays a role in there. So do they prefer learning from a high rank female than a low rank female?
So we've done an experiment where I didn't take the time to present here, where I had a dominant female and a mid-ranking females, both showing two different ways to open a box. And we found actually no difference between the two, but actually this mid-ranking females was copied by all the more lower ranking female than her. So even if you're mid-ranking, you still have you're still dominant over many others. And what was interesting is that dominant female always stick to the technique they were trained to do, whereas this mid-ranking females that were models over the time of the experiments, when they were not, it wasn't restricted to one opening type, then they would switch and try also the dominant female way of opening the box, so showing maybe more behavioral flexibility, and maybe that they still want to learn from this dominant one, where the dominant, even if it wasn't some of the technique, we realized, so it was the pivot push-in box, and realized that the pivot was actually harder to do than the push-in. So we would have expected them to all converge to doing only push-in, but the dominant that had learned the pivot way of opening the door would carry on always doing this. So there seems to be really paying attention to what other dominants are doing, irrespective of the outcome.
Oh, that's very interesting. So is there any, oh no, there's another question. So I'll stay there and then I'll ask later. Thank you, Erica.
Pleasure.
Okay, then Clara, please.
Hi, I'm Clara B. Jones. I have a question and then possibly another question. The first one is really primitive. How do you define cognition, and how do you distinguish it from old-fashioned learning? I'm thinking especially of whether we can't interpret a lot of these experiments or studies that are called cognition. I'm wondering if we can't interpret them in terms of a simpler mechanism. And I always think especially of Herrnstein's matching experiments.
Yeah, so I think we should always go for, if there is a simpler explanation for a simpler one than attributing high cognitive reasoning to what we find in the in our data set. And so I use the word cognition to refer to the different potential social learning biases that they use, and also the different mechanism that they can use. But I don't really expect it to be something. So the social learning biases have been found outside of primates, so I don't expect you need a large brain to find the kind of results we found, and most of it were really stimulus, local enhancement, be attracted to the apparatus or to the same side. Then there was just this one experiment where we had this box with the one knob that you could use either to slide or lift the door. And there we really found that in the group where the demonstrator was showing to lift, that individuals were lifting more than in the group showing to slide. So they really seemed to pay attention to the movement. But this is not, it's movement that are artificial on the box, but it's movement that they would do to move a branch. So it's not that they had to learn a new behavioral sequence. And I had the one experiment that was really hard for the monkeys. So it was a two-step artificial fruit. So they first had to remove a bar that would release a rope, and then they could open the box and access the food. And there I didn't find any of them to learn the sequence from a model. And I only managed to train doing step by step. Only 3 groups had the model. The other 3 groups stayed as control, and no one learned the full sequence. So they seem really to be able to learn about novel food, about how to open a simple box. But then physical cognition, they don't seem to be really good at the vervets. I've also tried the honey dipping experiments, and they like the honey. They took the stick in the honey, but they never learned to put it back. So yeah, for physical cognition, they seem to be more limited, but I still think that socially, so with the different playback experiment that were done already before by Dorothy Chenet and Robert Seyfarth, they really know who is who in the group and individual voices and the rank of each group member. So on these social aspects, they seem to be doing better. I hope I answered a bit your question.
Yeah, just really quickly. I'm not convinced. One of my specialties is behaviorism. So I always go really simple into the earlier models. And finally, I think the work with the robot is just fabulous. And, I look forward to seeing that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a big 4-leg robot. So this is the Bronco-Weiss fellowship that Karsten mentioned. So when I was a fellow, so it's for researcher in all kind of field. And there was this colleague who got the fellowship who was in robotic and have this big 4-leg robots that are a lot used for the army and for in dangerous area to control things. It can go in fires and water and stuff. And he was a fan of my monkey work, and then we tried to look to get some funding together. And so the little video clip you saw was just 1 week of exposure to the monkeys, and they got really used to it when it was a food provider. This year we brought it back, but it wasn't bringing any food. It was making food choices, and we wanted to see if the the monkeys could learn to eat a novel food resource after looking at what the robot was doing, and they didn't trust the robot to eat novel food. But if it was known food but with new coloring, then they would their first choice would be the same as the robot. So there seems to be some facilitation, but not really learning something totally new from the robot. And then the future step will be that the robot starts vocalizing and try to see if they can understand the robot and trust what the robot is informing them about the environment around, like doing food call, and the robot is moving away to a food source. Will they start to follow it or not? So these are a bit the plans with it.
Very cool.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, Adriana, you still have another question? Oh no, first comes Luca.
Well,
I didn't see that. Luca.
Third person can ask if someone wants to get a chance. Yeah, Luca.
Hello. Thanks for a fabulous talk. I really enjoyed it. So I was wondering whether there's any scope to look at play behavior in terms of social learning, because if the young vervets play in vastly different situations, then there might be scope to learn socially. So do you think you might look at that and see whether they learn socially in these contexts, or is it possible? What do you think?
So we have been lately looking a bit at play with some master's students at the field site. We're more interested to like first see at what age and sex differences. So we found that it's around 2-3 year old that the playing really peak, and it's mainly in juvenile males that play a lot, play fight together, whereas female tend already to spend more time in social behavior grooming than playing compared to males already, like different need to practice for what after. So for female, the bonding with the others and the grooming is really important as they stay there. Males have to fight after when they disperse, so this kind of match well. But it's true that we didn't look into detail on the behavioral sequence and the exact play. Playing is very messy to collect in the field. So usually it's not only 2, but often 6, 8, 10 juveniles playing together. So the field assistant always find it very hard. You have been there and also know it's not easy, but I guess we could try to look. I'm also thinking like in maybe we should look more into detail at grooming with like body presentation and stuff. Maybe there are things that also vary from one group to the next. So I think the more detailed data we have. So before we're doing mainly scans, and now we have moved to continuous focals. So with continuous focals on the individuals, we'll have also more detailed data, and then potentially the loggers have accelerometer on them. So if we can really infer well behavior from the loggers, then of course we'll have a lot more lot larger sample size per individuals, not just the 20-minute follow we can do once a week, but more continuous data. So we'll have to see also with the technology what we can get.
Yeah, great, thank you. And if possible, I've got a little follow-up question, because I found it interesting when you talked about that the adults might actually learn how to fit in and not necessarily learn information. Would it be possible to explain a bit more what you mean by this? For example, do you mean that they learn how to behave in that particular group, for example, during encounters? Or so what do you mean how to behave or how to fit in? What does it mean for you to talk about it like this?
So I think, yeah, maybe just a little how we do it here, the behavior of the group. And so for this, I really hope that with loggers, I'll be able to record the detailed vocalization. Because we've seen with the pilot study that there seems to be a group a signature of male grunts. And so males should be coming from all different origins, so it shouldn't be genetic. And then hopefully if we have we fit voice recorder on loggers, then we can really collect good quality calls and then see And we're currently doing the population genetic of our study population, and we'll know the relatedness between all males, and if they really call more in the same way, maybe it's a way to have also group identity towards other groups. So maybe with vocalization, we can investigate more this aspect of doing like others outside of the feeding context.
Awesome, thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, now Adriana, please. Sorry that I stopped you for the student.
No worries. Well, the follow-up question I had, Erica, is that if there were any benefits from the mid-ranking females copying the behavior of the high-ranking females, and what would be the cost for the high-ranking females to have such a fixed behavioral choice? Say.
Yeah, so in the case of the experiment, there wasn't really cost of doing one thing and another. So I think that's where it would be interesting to manage to do experiments with bigger payoff variation and see. But then, so we really see in vervets that females groom a lot more higher ranking females. Sorry. And so potentially this could be doing like the other female is also a way to bond with her potentially. Sorry, I have to get some more water.
So it will be some sort of like trying to get acceptance from the high-ranking female.
Yeah,
if I do the
tolerance.
same as I do, kind of
Maybe
like increasing the
tolerance
tolerance.
Or even also just for group cohesion, and that one have to behave more similarly in the group, and then by a byproduct you do the same kind of behavior at the same time, you forage at the same time, you move at the same time, and then maybe it goes also the way to how to do things.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Okay, is there any other question? Anyone else wants to ask something? Then I would like to, if there's nothing, then I would like to stop the YouTube. But before stopping the YouTube, still say again once more, thank you very much for this fascinating talk. It's really great to see these field experiments that you are able to do not only with one group, but with multiple groups of monkeys. Really great stuff.